My name is Emmett O'Neill, and I don't know of any family members or anybody that was ever named Emmett O'Neill, so I don't know where it came from. Nana, what about your name?
My name came from my Granny Barton, my mama's mother. Her name was Ida.
We were both born and grew up in Westville, Florida, and I was going to tell you about my nickname that I grew up with, Chink. When I was first born, my uncle said, well, he's no bigger than a chinky pin, and all of my life I was named Chink, and forever it stuck, and that was what a lot of people in Westville know me by to this day. They don't know who Emmett is.
I was born on a place called A.C. Royals, which was in Holmes County, but that was probably the people that owned that land, but they were called the Royals. I was born at home.
Were you guys both born at home?
Yes, I was born at home.
I have 7 siblings. I have 3 brothers and 4 sisters.
And I grew up with 2 brothers who are both now deceased.
And you were the baby.
I was the youngest one. I guess my first memory that I can really remember is even though I was 6 when my dad passed away, I remember him sitting in our house, and out the back door he shot out into the field and killed 2 quail that were together with a shotgun, and I ran out and picked them up and brought them back to the house.
When my daddy was pastoring the church at Reedy, we had a Model T Ford. And
y'all had a car?
you know we had a car. And when we were coming home from church one night, one of the tires came off the car and was rolling down the hill. And I remember vividly, because I was setting up, somebody had given us watermelons, and we had them in the middle of the car, and I was setting up on the watermelon, and I could see out, and I could see that tire rolling down the road, and it was a dirt road. And we had to stop, and I don't remember actually them fixing the tire, but I remember seeing the tire roll down the road.
We were poor. I mean, extremely poor. We didn't have anything. We had food most of the time, and we had a place to live, but we didn't have things. And being happy with what you had was just whatever it was. We just lived the life. Whatever God dealt, we took it and enjoyed it. I often tell a story about, I must have been 8 or 9 years old, and my mother let me go to the neighbor's house and spend the night on Christmas Eve. And the next morning, when the family got up and opened their Christmas present, the lady there, Miss Dorothy Powell, had a coloring book and a set of crayons for me, and that was the happiest day I'd ever knew.
Well, I had a good foundation with good, solid parents who loved us, and we were poor too. Daddy farmed, raised cotton, raised peanuts, always a big garden. We always had plenty to eat because they worked the garden, turnips and collards and peas and okra and all those things that I thought when I was a young person, if I could get away from that thing and get a hamburger, I would be real happy. But we had a good foundation, and when they said something, we knew that that's the way it was. You know, we always had biscuits, and Daddy used to break a biscuit open and put sugar on it and then pour coffee on top of it. And he'd make out like it was so good he'd eat it. I told him, I said, Daddy, I want that. I want some of that. He said, I don't think you do. I said, yeah, I want some. So he made me one. But when I tasted it, I did not like it. But he made me eat the whole thing.
How did you guys get in trouble as kids?
We never got in trouble.
Never.
We were too good.
Yeah. Go ahead. You can be first.
Well, of course, was raised by my mother because my dad had passed away when I was 6, and we would slip off and go to the swimming hole. Me and my friend Ellis, when we were 8 years old, by ourselves, and there were several miles down the road and then through the woods to get to the Pittman Creek where we'd go swimming. Just by ourselves, me and him. Nobody else there. And of course, my mama would correct me about that, but apparently not sufficient enough because I'd do it again the next day. I learned how to swim that year when I was 8 years old.
By yourself?
By myself. We didn't know you could drown.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I was a real good girl, but we used to have to sweep our yards. And sweeping your yards was with a homemade, they called it, what was the name of that?
Gallberries.
Gallberry sticks with things on the end of them that would sweep your yard, and all the yards were dirt. There was no grass. But anyway, we had to keep the streaks when we swept the yard perfectly straight. And I used to intentionally mess them up and get in trouble. Your great-granddaddy had an offer to buy property on Panama City Beach for 25 cents or 50 cents an acre. And he said, what would I do with that sandy? I can't grow anything within all that sand. And so he didn't take it. As a farmer, he didn't have any use for that sandy, you couldn't grow anything on it. So we would have been rich today if he would have took it. Mm. Clint, one thing that we did when we were younger is when you picked the cotton, you emptied the cotton out in a barn. And it'd be a lot of cotton in that barn, and you'd play on that cotton. But one time, some kids smothered. They got under the cotton and couldn't get out, and they smothered. And so we were warned, don't get in the cotton because you might smother.
Yeah. My Uncle Jim.
One of a kind.
Are there stories to Uncle Jim? Or
Well, he was just a rock in the family. He was stable. He was there. And he lived next door to us when I was real young. Uncle Jim and Aunt Bobby lived next door to us in a barn or crib that had a dirt floor in it. They didn't have wooden floors. They didn't have no floor. Dirt.
When the floors got dirty, Clint, they went to the river, to the sandbar, and got new sand to redo the floor with.
We got new dirt to put down on the dirty dirt.
Uncle Jim and Aunt Bobby. And he wore a black felt hat, wore suspenders with a white shirt, and he walked a lot up and down the road, to the store, back and forth. And when we would see him coming, we would say, there goes Uncle Jim.
He had on his white shirt, and he had those like garters on it up above his elbows.
He was a classy guy.
Where I grew up, he lived as far as from here to your mother's house apart. When I was growing up.
Just right down the street.
Actually, it was a crib. It was a corn crib is what it was. That when he moved out of it, we made a corn crib out of it. And then he moved a quarter of a mile away and built a house with a floor in it.
My daddy had a sister named Aunt Martha. I love my Aunt Martha. She played the accordion and she played the guitar, she sang. But her and my Uncle Murphy was a preacher. And Aunt Martha had chickens and everything, And something was getting her chickens. And she told Uncle Murphy, she said, something is messing with my chickens. And stealing them. And she said, and I'm going to find out who it is. She told him she was going to shoot him. And she had a pistol. And she always kept it by her chair, in the chair with her. And it was a white pearl handled pistol. And so somebody come up out there, and she went out there and shot him. Shot him buckshot. And they went to the hospital in Geneva. But the sheriff came out there. And he said, Miss Martha, you cannot be shooting people. You can't shoot people. And she said, well, if they mess with my chickens, I'm going to shoot them. She said, you might as well just send somebody on out here. And that was the type of lady she was. And she's sweet as she could be, but she meant nobody was going to mess around.
Well, growing up, we worked on the farm with our farm neighbors. We would work on the farm with them, but it wasn't to make money to spend. We would have to make money to buy our school clothes with for the next school year. And we were making $3 a day, and that was from daylight till dark. And we would make $3 a day, and I don't remember ever spending any of that money for fun things. I bought school clothes with it.
But that was fun to
Well,
get to go
I
buy
guess.
school clothes.
Probably just basic reading and writing and arithmetic was our classes. We both went to New Hope School in Westville. And there was a school in our community called Open Pond School, but it closed. It was a one-room schoolhouse, and it closed the year that I started school. So I never went there. My brothers did.
We rode the school bus, and sometimes we had to walk a pretty good ways to get on the bus. And it would be really cold. But we rode the school bus probably 10 or 12 miles to the school.
About 10 miles. Well, we had a lot of teachers. In elementary school, the one that we continue to remember was Miss Shy and
Miss Roberts.
Robinson. Miss Robinson and Miss Shy was our elementary teachers, but our favorite teacher was Miss Daisy Manning in high school that taught us English.
She went to all of our reunions, came to all of our reunions, and until last year. And she got COVID this year, and she passed away at 90 years old. So she was quite a teacher, a good Christian lady, a good Christian teacher.
There were two churches in our community. There was a church, well, there were several churches, but the one that I grew up at, her dad pastored for several years there, and the church that I grew up at was United Pentecostal Church. Not so much separated in doctrine as the United Pentecostal and the Assemblies of God seem to be today, but they intercommunicated with each other, the two churches did, and something would be going on at what we call the Open Pond Church is where I went, and she went to the Mount Pleasant Church. But when something would be going on at either church, the other church members would go there and support it.
Your great-granddaddy pastored Mount Pleasant Assembly of God, Reedy Assembly of God, and Mount Olive Assembly of God. And your uncle, who is my brother Wayne, pastors now Mount Olive Assembly of God. Oh, and let me tell you a little story about when Daddy was pastoring. You had to behave in church, and you sat in church. And if we ever got out of line, we were in trouble. So me and Betty, my older sister, we were just talking. And I looked up, and I knew Daddy saw us, and I knew we were in trouble. So when we got home that night, we got in bed, got under the cover as fast as we could. But here come Daddy about the time we'd settled down, and he said, "You girls, you know what I promised you if you disobeyed in church and, got loud and everything." So he gave us a spanking. We laughed about it for years after that, but that type of thing we knew, if they said it, that's the way it was.
Do you remember meeting each other?
She was just always there.
We probably really truthfully, about in the 8th or 9th grade, we started paying attention to each other a little bit. And we would sit on the school bus together. And it just kind of grew from there. And he moved, Emmett Chink, moved away and moved to Michigan in the 10th grade. And I was still going to Ponce de Leon. And let me tell you this little story. There was, when he came back to school in the 11th grade, there was a girl that liked him really well. And I didn't like her at all.
Let me tell my story about our first kiss.
Oh, that's a good, yeah.
Tell the truth now.
I'm going to tell the truth
this
just like
it is.
This is
on the video.
Me and Ellis, and I'd mentioned him probably several times, but he was our best friend that lived across. And his sister, Lamar, was Ida's best friend. And me and Ellis had been swimming, and this was when we were maybe 14 years old. And me and Ellis had been swimming, and we came home from swimming, and for some reason, Ellis's mama, Miss Vivian, was not at home, but Ida and Lamar was at the house. So we came into the house, and here comes Ida walking by, and I just reached and got her by the hand and pulled her down on my lap. And I thought I was going to give her a kiss, but it turned out to be the other way around. It's the truth.
It's not.
And so there we were,
Honey.
with the longest kiss of my life. I couldn't get up. And that was when it started. And that's the truth.
No, that's not the way it was.
Well, in our young years, I don't remember really any specific songs, but we would listen to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night. And not just us, probably, but everybody in the community would listen to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night.
One of our favorite songs were, when we were teenagers or a little bit older, was Marty Robbins, A White Sports Coat. That was Emmett and I's favorite song, because when we went to the prom, he had on a white sports coat
and a red carnation.
And a red carnation, but the song went pink carnation. And when we did get to go to our senior prom, and one of our friends, who was my older brother's friend, same age, had a new Ford. And he let us borrow, was it a Ford?
Yeah.
Yeah. He let us borrow that brand new car, young uns, and we drove it to the prom. We thought we were big wheels. It was really pretty too, wasn't it?
Yeah. A new Ford. And this guy, Sam Bowers, just let us borrow it. I can't imagine today somebody coming up at little young kids wanting to borrow your new car. And then my first job, public job, was in Panama City, building Hathaway Bridge, and I'd heard that they were hiring helpers there, and I went down. I was 17 years old. This was between my junior and senior year in high school, and I went down, and my interview was, the boss said, "Are you 18 years old?" I said, "Oh, yes, I'm 18." And he said, "Well, go to work over there moving those 2x4s." So, and then I made $2 an hour there.
I went to work in Geneva at a shirt factory, and my job was to sew the pocket, not onto the shirt, but just the flap that came over and around the pocket is what I did. So I worked there from the time I got out of school till July. In fact, I think my last day was about that Friday before we got married on Saturday.
I don't remember
A
a
formal
proposal as
Or did you guys just know?
just knew we were going to get married.
It just kept growing and growing from there. And when we graduated we marched down the aisle when we graduated together. Graduated May the 30th, 1960, and July the 23rd. Emmett's mama, uncle, and kids came to get me. We came to get married. And we went to get married, and the judge was not there. And so we had to go back. I think I got this story right. But we went back, and the Justice of the Peace married us in Geneva, Alabama. With my mama, sister, brother, and Granny Sally, Emmett's mama. We got married on Saturday night and left Sunday going to Houston. Moving back to Houston.
In July of 60, we moved to Houston, and we lived there until October of 60 when I joined the United States Air Force. The draft was hot. I knew I was going to be drafted by the Army, and I would rather go into the Air Force than into the Army, so I joined the United States Air Force in October of 1960.
And I moved back home to stay with Mom and Daddy while he was gone. And he was gone 6 months? 6 weeks?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. And we had a a Christmas Eve program in our church. And my mama told me, she said, somebody's outside and wants to see you. And when I walked out the door to the church, there he stood in a Air Force uniform. First time I'd ever seen him in that. And my heart just skipped a beat.
When we left after Christmas Eve, we went to Illinois for some training. This story is titled, Be Careful What You Pray For. So we were in Illinois, and our prayer was, Lord, we have to have a car. We have to get to New Jersey. Lord, provide us a car just so we can get to our new place in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And I was able to buy a car, which was a Studebaker. That's for Beth. Studebaker. And we drove it to Florida. We drove it to Houston, back to Florida, to New Jersey. And when we got to New Jersey, it stopped and never ran again. But it did what answered our prayers, right. Get us to New Jersey. But anyway, so we were without a car, and the pastor of our church said, Emmett, I found you a car. He said, it looks pretty rough, but it runs good. I think they wanted $100 for it. And I said, I don't have $100. I don't have any money. He said, well, come with me. And we went to the bank. And to my shock, we walked in the bank, and he says to the bank officer, loan this person $100. And the guy said, okay. He said, how do you want to pay it back? And I said, I can pay it back $10 a month. And so we bought our first car. Well, that was not our first one. Our first one, I guess, was before that. But we bought that car at $10 a month, and we drove it forever. And it was a DeSoto, and it was such a big car, very nice car, and was extremely comfortable. And we drove it for I don't know how many years that we drove that DeSoto. But anyway, he just walked into the bank and said, loan him $100. And I thought, boy, I want to do that. I want to be able to do that. November 1961, that your mother, Pamela Ada Huggins, was born at
Walter Reed.
At Fort Dix McGuire Hospital, Walter Reed Hospital. The Air Force and the Army shared the hospital, and it was Walter Reed Hospital, and that's where she was born.
No family members could get in there. He took me to the hospital, kind of dropped me off with a suitcase, and no family could get in there. It's kind of like the COVID thing now, you know. And
then I went back and picked her up. At about 3 days, she was in the hospital with Pamela.
3 days.
And I went back and picked her up and took her and Pamela back to our one-room apartment. And joy of our life when Pamela was born.
It was cold weather. We didn't have Pampers. We had bird's eye diapers, cloth.
Cloth diapers.
And we didn't have a dryer. You had to wash the diapers out in the house. And I went outside to the clothesline to hang them out, and they froze. Before I could get them up out of the basket and put the clothespin on the hanger, the diaper would be froze, and I'd have to pull it apart. That was the experience with Pamela.
Yeah. I was working 2 jobs, and I'd have had responsibility of the house and Pamela, and I, when Pamela was just a few months old and was going off of her formula and getting on to milk, I was going to work one morning, and Ida told me, I have enough milk for Pamela for her noon feeding, but that's all of it. It's all gone. So I went to work that day, and I asked everybody that worked with me, I don't think I missed any of them, do you have 50 cents I can borrow to payday so I can buy a gallon of milk? And everybody said no.
So what did you do?
So I'm going home. I'm on my way home to tell Ida we don't have any milk. And I don't know what I'm doing. So it was work on your nervous system a little bit. And this man stopped me on the road. And he said, are you in a hurry? And I said, no. And he said, would you help me set this piano down off this truck and into the house? I said, yes, I will. And so we set the piano down, moved it into the house, and I turned to walk away, and he gave me $1.
So
I had twice as much money as I needed. We had three
kids. We have 3 kids.
Pamela, our oldest, Monica, our next, and Richard, our youngest.
So you had a boy as the baby.
Yeah. And when Monica was born, she was also born in the same hospital that Pamela was born in, at Fort Dix, New Jersey, McGuire Air Force Base.
Richard was born in Michigan.
That's what it is.
So
That was after Vietnam. When Pamela and Monica were little, Monica was probably 18 months old when their daddy went to Vietnam.
I was in the Air Force for 8 years. I was in Vietnam for 1 year.
And you had two
girls, Pamela and Monica, and we stayed with Mom and Daddy that year. And he was gone a whole year too. I meant to the day.
I left on Thanksgiving Day of '66, come back Thanksgiving Day of '67.
It was a long year. And your mother was 4 years old. And every time she would hear a plane come over or something at home, she would think it's for Daddy. Back then, Clint, you could walk right out to the airport, and watch the planes take off. So I think her little mind, she remembered some of that stuff, We wrote a letter to each other every day of the year. That year.
Yeah, and there was one time when I was in Vietnam, I was able to get a phone call through to Nana. I think only once.
It was like a delayed call,
Like a ham radio. Some ham radio people got us through so we could talk to each other.
In fact, that was the time that we made plans for me to go.
To Hawaii.
Come out there. And I drove, my brother Wayne went with me and Pamela and Monica to Houston. And they stayed with their Granny Sally. And Suzette and Ray, Emmett's brother and wife, took me to the airport. And I have never flown before. When I got to Hawaii, they took us through customs. I didn't know what customs was. And it was just like it was an open market thing. No sides on the building. And I had no reservations. And I started listening to other people that were talking about where they were going. And I can't remember what the name of the motel was that I stayed in that night, but first time I'd ever been in a motel by myself. First night ever staying by myself. Had to get up the next morning because the guys were coming in on a flight from Vietnam. And all the wives, the spouses, were getting to the airport. And when I got to the airport, they had the families roped off so they couldn't get to the guys on the plane. But they had Miss Hawaii there greeting all the guys as they got off the plane.
Get a hug and a kiss from Miss Hawaii.
And then they put all the guys on the bus to take them to the base. I had not seen him yet. They went to the base, took him to the base, and then I got a taxi thinking, we found out where they went. But I guess I was thinking, we're going to stay there. So I got a taxi all by myself. Went over there. It cost me $5 to get over there. And then, when we got there and we got together, our motel was back where I came from.
Yeah,
So
but we didn't get together there. We were separated for like 4 or 5 hours. You didn't know where I was at, and I didn't know where you were at.
Yeah. But when we got together, went back to our motel in
Waikiki Beach.
Cost us $5. $5 back then to us was a lot of money. And we could see that money going away. But the next morning, Clint, in the motel, we ordered coffee to the room. It cost us $3 for 2 cups of coffee, which we thought, Lord, what in the world?
No more room service for us.
Yeah, that's what we said. Well, in culture in the church has really changed. Because when I grew up, in our church, the ladies wore dresses, never pants. Your hair grew out. You wore your hair long, and there was no makeup. In the older generation over me. Now, when my generation started, we kind of started breaking the laws.
Rebellion.
Yeah, I guess you'd say that. And so that, from then to now, the church world has changed, as far as culture goes, dramatically. Some for the better, some for the worse. We're probably taking it a little bit far in dress at the church. My opinion. But it's changed. You talk about changing.
And we talked about communications, how communications has changed because we've seen it go from no telephones, basically, or at least in our community there were no phones, to cell phones, and everybody's got one now. And live TV and Zoom and all the things that people do in businesses where they have business meetings miles and miles apart, and yet they're in the same room.
We didn't have a TV, Clint, in our house. So the neighbors who ran a little grocery store, they had a TV. So sometimes we would all go there and watch a program like, what was the name of the we used to watch?
Gunsmoke.
Well, Gunsmoke was probably the first one. Johnny Mac Brown was one of the actors. But we didn't have a TV. We went to bed at sundown because there was nothing to do.
But we didn't have no electricity.
Right. No electricity in the house. No bathrooms, inside bathrooms. No running water. A little bit of interesting thing you might want to know is, in the kitchen we had a water bucket and a dipper that everybody in the house drank out of the same dipper.
We didn't have no dirty glasses, did we?
And we had a wash pan right there beside it, a little pan that you washed your hands in. And everybody washed their hands till the water got dirty.
In the same water.
That was in our kitchen.
And dried on the same towel.
I'll tell you what I used to do, Clint, as a teenager. You'd fill the tub up, outside tub, and take it to the barn and said put it in the barn and let the sun shine on it, and the water would get warm, and that was a treat. To get out there, you would be all by yourself in the barn taking a bath. That was a treat.
We were
Yes.
traveling when the first man walked on the moon. We were traveling. I'm not sure where we was going, but we were traveling, and we stopped at a service station, and it was on TV, and we went in the service. I did. I think you waited in the car, but I went inside and stayed in the service station for several minutes, or probably 30 or so minutes, and watched as the TV announced the first man on the moon. And a lot of people didn't believe it. They thought it was
Oh yeah, a lot
false
of people did.
advertising or a setup. They didn't think it was real.
Really, even when it was happening?
Yeah, a lot of people. I was in the Air Force when JFK was assassinated, and I was at work, and
It was in 1964.
I think
Yeah,
so,
in 1964.
64. But I was out doing a job on an airplane, and I came back into the shop, and one of my coworkers said, "The president's been shot." And of course, it was big news. Being in the Air Force, it was big news. And I don't remember so much of the alert, but I'm sure we went on alerts. I guess the most memorable piece of history is most recent is when the 9/11 happened.
Oh yes, I was watching TV. Emmett was getting on a plane, leaving to go off on a job. They had already left home and was almost to Atlanta.
Almost to Atlanta.
And I called him and I said, "Are you listening to the news?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, turn your radio on, because the towers have been hit." Well, you pulled off the road at a service station or something.
Well, we turned the radio on right away, and the first thing the guy said on the radio was, "If you're coming to the Atlanta airport, don't come here." And we were about 4 or 5 miles from Atlanta airport to catch a flight.
He would have been on a plane if it happened. But I was watching it, and I called. It was on Scott's birthday. And I called their house. I was calling everybody. I called their house, and they were out swinging in the yard. I told Courtney, I said, "Go tell your mama to come in. I want to tell her something." That was traumatic to me now.
It changed the world, didn't it?
It really did. I think one thing, Clint, is when I'm down, Emmett is up. When he's down, I'm up. So I think that's gotten us through things, Is we say, we can do this, you can do this. Don't you think that's what it was? You can.
But we never doubted. We never had any doubts, or I don't never ever remember and say, "Why God?" I never remember that. That's never happened in our life.
You wonder, well, let me say this about your mother. I've often wondered why she's going through what she's going through.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't say, "Why God?"
No, I haven't blamed God for it at all, or anybody. It's just that, you wonder why some people get certain things at a young age.
Well, not just that, but Pamela's had a hard things happen with Rebecca and
oh yeah,
her sickness and Rebecca's sickness, and yet
But she hasn't
She is
said
so
why.
she is so strong and an amazing woman.
She is. She never complains, Clint.
She's been here like how many years? 4 years? 5 years?
Never complains. She won't. She won't tell you.
And will never ask hardly. You can't get her to ask for help. I help some, but it's because I help, not because she asked me.
I think my worst thing is when my daddy suddenly died with an heart attack. And we were here in Milton, and we had gotten up that Saturday morning and was just out running around going to parties and, you know. And when I got back home, I had messages on my phone to call home. And that just did not happen. They didn't, my family didn't do that, you know. And when I called, my brother Roger was the one that had called. And they said Daddy had died. That was most devastating. Because I had just been down there about 3 weeks before that time.
And he was doing good.
Spent the night with him, you know. And he was doing great. And he was getting ready to grind cane that morning and was sitting on the front porch. And his chest started hurting. And Mama got him inside on the couch and got him to take an aspirin, and he just fell over with a heart attack and died. You know, we always had a big Christmas at their house, Christmas Eve. And we debated having the Christmas thing. We said, yeah, let's go ahead and do it.
And tell us when he died.
He died on Halloween.
On October
31st. And I don't like Halloween to this day because of that. But anyway, the church up there was what they called a harvest festival, and they had a lot of food cooked. And what the church did that night was brought all that food to Mama's. Just filled the table up and stove up, and you know, with food. And it was hard. And my mama was the one that was sick. It wasn't Daddy. And Mama lived 1 year to the day. Well, she died on the 30th of October, 1 year, and Daddy had been dead a year. But what we did with Mama after that was we all got together, brothers and sisters got together, and we said we're not going to leave her by herself. So we had a plan. Every one of us was going to chip in and do our time. So my sister that lived in Columbus, Georgia, it was a long way for her to drive. But she took her turn once a week.
Once a month.
No, I went down there once a week.
Oh, did you? Okay, I can't remember.
Once a week, drove down there and spent the night. I think I stayed 2 nights, but we usually had 2 siblings together, and we sat with Mama the whole year. She had a blood cancer, and then she also had cancer on her nose, Clint. I don't know if your mama's ever told you, but she had her nose completely removed and redone. But she kind of come through the nose part, but the cancer broke out at other places on her. It came through her forehead. And so, you know, that was tough.
I think the key thing here is commitment. I don't think there's any commitment in the young generation today. They're not committed to family. They're not committed to their company business, whoever they work for. There's no commitment. There's no things. And I know the companies that I worked for, I always felt my job was to make them successful. Young couples, I think today, even when they get married, they got, you know, if it don't work out, we'll get a divorce.
One thing that we've never talked about is, even though when you get mad, you don't talk about divorce. You know, that was just not a word that came up. Well, if you don't straighten up, we're getting a divorce. I don't think neither one of us. We've never said those words to each other. Spending time together. You know, not living separate lives.
And little things is so important. When we were married and had like nothing, and we were really struggling, and Pamela was a baby, and I would go to work, and we were living in New Jersey. It was wintertime. It was cold, and I would come home from work sometimes when I would find enough money to buy a Coke, and I would have a Coke in my Parker pocket
Bottled Coke.
when I would come home, and Nana would just be so delighted because I brought a Coke home. And I was always trying to do something that would make her happy.
I think for me, it was that Emmett he always made me feel like that no matter what he did or how much money he had, it was just as much mine as it was his. And never separate bank accounts or separate, it was all,
Yeah.
It's always been, what we had was together.
Mm-hmm.
And I always was the person that did things at home. Emmett, when he come home from work, supper was done. All we had to do was pour the tea. He never had to do housework. You would do some things, take out the garbage and that kind of thing, but, it was roles.
I think having Christ as center of the home and giving him recognition that he is due.
And not making one feel less than the other.
Yeah.
Equal partnership.
If you guys have any favorite scriptures?
That all things work together
I
for
was
good.
thinking the same thing.
And when you know and believe that it's hard, but somehow all things work together for good.
To them that love the Lord. Those
Ones that are called according to his purpose. And that's, when you know that, and you got it deep in your heart and you know that, then things aren't so likely to shake your foundation.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I think it's just believing that when you pray, God hears. God hears that prayer. And he said, whatsoever you ask in my name, believing, it will come to pass. It will be. So, we just have to kind of take him at his word. And if he don't answer when we want him to, that doesn't mean that the answer's not there.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the next 25, 50 years are going to look like? What are some of the hopes that you have, or some of the concerns that you have?
Concerns.
Yeah?
I
A
think
lot of concerns.
I think what we need is a real revival in the country. Where God really comes down and touches people's hearts and changes their minds and their spirits, and that's the only thing that's going to do it, because the Democrats or the Republicans are not going to do that, or the president. No matter who the president is.
I work with the Gideons now, even, where we give Bibles out to schools and motels and families where their loved ones have passed away. We do Bibles for them. Cards and Bibles, and the Gideons give out 1 million Bibles a day or something right now.
Why does that matter to you?
To get the word, God said, "My word won't return void. It's going to accomplish what it's intended for." So, as a Gideon, we try what we can and do what we can to see that anybody who wants or needs or will accept a Bible gets one. And they're all free. and they're in any motel. Just most motels where you go, you'll find a Gideon Bible in the nightstand, and you can't steal those because we put them in there for people to take.
And I work with the auxiliary in the Gideons.
What does that look like?
It's ladies that their calling is to pray for their Gideon husbands. And we place Bibles in doctor's offices and dentist offices. You know, when they go in, and if you see that Gideon Bible laying, some ladies have placed that there.
What have been some of the best gifts that you remember, or celebrations that you remember throughout the years?
I think by far was our 50th anniversary. Our kids and our grandkids and you, and as you kind of emceed everything over our 50th anniversary, and the different things that our kids did. And I had so much fun that night. And singing to Nana. Because everybody knows I can't sing, and I did. But it was just, that's a memory that's just extraordinary memory. I think the thing that is now a main part of our Christmas is getting together on New Year's Eve. And we've been doing that for like 20 years now, maybe. And we have our Christmas at New Year's Eve, and sometimes there's some money involved. And as the different family members compete for money and answer the questionnaires that I might have for them, that's just been a fun time New Year's Eve has for the last 20 years. And we're just trying to carry that on. And we got one this year, Christmas Eve, or New Year's Eve, coming up in just a few days, and no telling what's going to happen.
The night Santa Claus came here a few years ago to see the little great-grandkids respond. That was one of my happy.
That was so much fun.
When Alina said, Papa, you missed him.
He came.
You missed him. And then she saw his clothes laying on the bed. She said he forgot his clothes.
That was a very fun night when Santa Claus came.
And when Rebecca said, she told Alina, Rezzy, one of them, she said, if you ever hear a Santa Claus that talks like that, you run.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good
one. That was a good one.
Because nobody knew it was going to happen. So Richard got concerned about us.
And he kept wanting to know what was going on.
Yeah, he come down the hall, and I said, we'll be out in a little bit.
If someone says, this is Emmett, this is Ida, this is who they were, this is what they were about, what would those things?
For having peace in their life. I think having peace.
For knowing that your children loved you, and nothing that you wouldn't do for them, and probably that they wouldn't do for you. And grandchildren. In fact, when you were born, Clint, we were in Americus, Georgia. Your mom lived in Wichita, and that was, I wanted to be there with her, but we got me a ticket to Wichita. And you were already born, but you were still in the hospital. So I did get there for, to bring you home with your mom and dad. And stayed with them about a week. And then Papa and Richard and Monica drove up. So, and one thing I wanted to say about is I have been with every child that was born. 8 grandchildren. And I've been there for all 8.
That's special.
Yeah.
I never could say that.
Yes, for 8 grandchildren. Not for the great-grandkids.
No, we have not been.
Well, they've lived so far away from us. But I remember holding Alina when she was just a tiny baby, so
Yeah.
we must have went there to their house to.
Yeah.
And I cried the first time I held Alina.
Mm-hmm.
Put that little baby in my arms. It just was sweet as could be.
I think the one thing that if they heard about me, that they would say he loved his wife and family. There's nothing that he would not do for them. And the wife comes first. And then everybody else comes after that.
And if I was gone, they would say she was a very snappy young woman.
Right.
No, I hope people would say she loved her family, loved her kids, her grandkids, loved the church, loved the people from the church, and was just a person that cared and loved and prayed.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a good life.
We have.
We have been
Excellent.
blessed. I would like to tell a story on Clint.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
We went to Disney World, and Clint left his money in the motel room.
In the motorhome we was.
In the motorhome we went on. And Papa said, well, I'll just, I'll give you the money now and you can give me the money back.
We were playing putt-putt golf.
Okay. Well, you said okay, of course, But when we got back to the motel, Papa said, where's my money? And you said, it's my money, Papa. It's not your money.
And I insisted that you pay me back, and then
Clint got upset, and you said, no, it's
that's okay. I didn't mean it.
How old was I? Was not. It was before Becca was born.
Yeah,
so-
before
Yeah,
Rebecca.
oh yeah, you weren't very big
I
at
would've
all.
been
We just thought it was fun.
9 years old,
Maybe.
8 or 9.
But anyway,
About Judah.
Yeah.
you wanted to play the golf, and you didn't have your money, and I said, well, I'll pay for it, but you got to give me the money back. And you said, okay. But then when you got to the room, you said, we already did that. We already played golf. I don't need to pay for it now.